Rick Tocchet calls out Elias Pettersson after another lackluster performance and other top players after Vancouver failed to get the W to lose their second straight game to start the season. And after Tyler Myers' scary injury, we analyze some of the defensive implications it'll have going forward. We're going to be breaking down all of that in this episode of Canucks Digest, but first make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you don't miss any updates surrounding the Canucks as we head through this season. And with that, let's hop into the first topic of the day, which is Tocchet calls out Pettersson and others. And after the game, Tocchet was talking about that first Philadelphia power play goal that they gave up, saying Pettersson was kind of flat-footed, he's got to gap up, and he's got to be the wedge guy. And this isn't anything new from Tocchet, where we've seen him hold guys accountable after poor performances, after some games where he needs them to get going, get back to their normal self, and get them motivated to just get back on the horse. And I think we're seeing that with Tocchet calling out Petey in the media here. He doesn't call out guys unless he absolutely has to. Last season in the playoffs, when he called out the passengers that Vancouver had, they came out guns blazing the next game to make sure that they didn't on the next game. And I think this is the case with Pettersson, where he's saying, hey, you have a slow start to start the season. We didn't want this to start the season. We wanted to escape what happened last season after a little bit of a downslide and just go into this season fresh. And it seems like it's going to take a little bit to get that going. And when looking at the top two lines, Vancouver didn't generate a single 5-on-5 shot attempt with Miller or Pettersson on the ice in the first period. Miller's line started creating more zone time in the second period and had a good underlying numbers by the end of the game, but it couldn't create true grade A chances from the inner slot. And after the first period, Vancouver was kind of irrelevant offensively. They didn't get more than 10 shots on goal after the first period per period. They were very sluggish. The offense was not going except for the third and fourth line, shockingly enough. And when looking at Petey's line in particular, Pettersson, DeBrusk, and Sprong were the Canucks' three lowest ranking forwards for 5-on-5 ice time, which says all you need to know about that line's performance. It was not close to good enough. And when he was talking about his top players and what he expects from them, Tocchet was saying, like to see a little bit more net front presence, more shooting mentality, but for the most part, the zone time. We just got to start converting. And we saw that happen in the second period, where Vancouver was able to get that offensive zone time. They were able to create some opportunities, but it just was not good enough. They didn't have any high-risk chances like Philadelphia was getting when they were cashing in on Lankinen, who, mind you, he did have a great performance. I think he has now won the starting goalie position for at least the next few games. Give Shilovs a bit of a rest to kind of recuperate what he has been doing to try and refine his tools to make sure he's stopping shots from a distance and through traffic. And I think Kevin Lankinen did play a really solid game. He didn't give up too many goals. They were on some hard to stop chances, that tic-tac-toe goal and as well as the other ones. And then of course you go to a shootout, it's going to be a gamble and a 50-50 every time. But when we look at the lineup for last night's game on Alex Edler night, of course, maybe they could have laced him up after the Tyler Myers injury. He was already in the gear. A lot of people were calling for it on Twitter. But as well, when you look at that third and fourth line, Niels Höglander played phenomenal. He was coming out guns blazing. He was ready to prove a point. He was getting in there. He was getting involved. Yes, he took a penalty, but it was a good tone setter penalty where he was just showing, hey, I can score, I can scrap, and I'm not going to go down without a fight. And then as well as you have that Teddy Bluger line, which honestly might have been the best line of the night, especially when you look at the forward stats. If you want to pause it and take a look, the most opportunities really came from that fourth line and that third line. Kiefer Sherwood racking up 5 hits alone. He was physical. He was making his presence known out there. Teddy Bluger as well, getting the goal as well. That was awesome to see. Kiefer Sherwood was also a +1 with him on the ice as well. Daniel Sprong was the -1 as well. Connor Garland got the assist as well on the goal off of the great interception with that takeaway in the offensive zone. So there was a lot left to be desired with this Vancouver Canucks roster so far, particularly in the top lines. Danton Heinen, he's been getting some chances. He's due to break out at some point. But that second line, I've been really excited to see what that second line was going to do this season. And they haven't really lived up to expectations yet. I think we're going to see a little bit of shakeup maybe happening. Maybe we move Danton Heinen to the second line. Maybe we move DeBrusk up to that top line just to see what can get going or what they could do to make sure that they can get this offense going moving forward. We saw them have a decent first period where there was a decent amount of offensive chances, and then it just dwindled away little by little. And then by the time they got to the shootout, we saw Brock Boeser's shootout attempt, just the effort maybe the effort wasn't there, but the speed wasn't there, the efficiency wasn't there, and that just spoke to what Vancouver was playing for the rest of the game. But let us know what you guys think down in the comments. What did you guys think about last night's game against the Flyers? Are you worried about Pettersson? Do you think he's going to get going eventually? Do you think Danton Heinen is due to finally break out and get that first goal as a Vancouver Canuck? We'd love to hear what you guys have to say, but that's going to lead us into the second topic of the day, which is Tyler Myers' injury implications. So Tyler Myers, in his first shift in the game, he only got 36 seconds of time on ice until he went down with a knee injury. It looked like a pretty bad one. He had to be helped off of the ice. And when talking about the Tyler Myers injury, Tocchet said, "Myers, I don't know. Hopefully we dodged the bullet, but I'm not sure." Not very reassuring coming out of that with that outlook. It did not look very pretty. We saw that Patrik Allvin had a very similar kind of knee injury with that knee-on-knee collision in the preseason. We know that when we see things like that, it often means one of two things, and that is either an ACL, meniscus, or PCL, MCL. Anything to do with the knee, it's usually one of those major ligaments or a meniscus tear. Hopefully it's neither of those. Hopefully it's just a bit of a shakeup. But again, this is not going to be looking good for the Canucks, especially when looking at the defensive implications that this is going to have. You see that in this game, they were already down one defenseman after they had the scratch of Vinny Desharnais, sorry, I should say. Desharnais was scratched off, so they did have to go down to 5 defensemen for the rest of the game. And you saw there that Quinn Hughes and Filip Hronek could not catch a breath to save their lives. Quinn Hughes had 31 minutes of time on ice, over 10 in the first period alone. So he was getting gassed out there, but he was still trying to make an effort. He didn't get as many of the good chances that Quinn Hughes usually gets, where he's able to make scoring chances coming off of the wing, where he's coming in from the blue line. And there was also not a lot of offensive setup chances happening. We saw that this offense just could not get going once they lost Myers. I know we lost him early, but as far as a defensive standpoint, it really could not stand up, especially when looking at the defensive implications it's going to have going forward. You're going to have Derek Forbort or you're going to maybe have to have Juleson move up to that second pairing, or Desharnais move up into that second pairing. Someone's going to have to step up, or maybe Vancouver goes out and makes a move at the trade deadline. There's obviously lots of time for something to happen. And of course, if Myers is injured, he did just sign that extension, so you can put him on LTIR to free up some of that cap space so that they can go after a guy instead of having to move someone up. And maybe some of these guys aren't ready. Maybe they call up Mark Friedman as well. That's also a potential possibility. There are options that they have within the AHL system, but with Myers' salary and cap hit, if they can move him on to LTIR, if it is one of those situations, maybe they can go out and get a guy where they can make a trade some draft capital, and bring in a guy on a 1-year rental where we can have an insurance policy. If Myers is out long term, then we have that covered for when he is ready to come back, either at the end of this season or the beginning of next season. I know it's hard to not go to worst case scenario with this thing. It's not going to be very easy to go forward without Tyler Myers. He is such a very big part of this defensive core. He is on that second pairing for a reason. And if we don't have him going forward, it's best to just prepare for the worst and hope for the best in this scenario. So as far as preparing for the worst, I'm preparing for an ACL. I'm not saying that is the case necessarily. We haven't heard anything concrete. It's going to come out as the week develops. However, with the way it looked, it did look like it was going to be a very bad injury. So again, if they move an LTIR, go get a defenseman so that you have something reliable instead of calling up an AHL guy. That would probably be the game plan for Vancouver to do if it is worst case scenario. But what do you guys think down below? Do you think the Myers injury is going to be as serious as it looked? Do you think it might be something that Vancouver dodged a bullet on? Love to hear what you guys have to say down in the comments. That's going to take us into the final topic of the day, which is comment of the day. And we see here from O Canada that I like the Höglander, Blueger, Sherwood line, as they could be a real energizer for the team. A nice fourth line. And we saw that with the Friday game. We saw that line was the top line of the night. Blueger had a great game, and him and Sherwood are developing a really good chemistry. So would love to see what more comes of that fourth line going forward. Maybe they move up as the third line. I know this team is going to look different once Dakota Joshua is back, and then him and Garland are just going to resume their regularly scheduled programming on that third line and becoming very efficient. But it's going to take a little while to get there. Eventually we will get there. Eventually we'll get Demko back. So again, it's not time to hit the panic button yet. We did get 2 points out of these 2 losses, so that is one thing at least. However, we did want to make that swing. I did say in the last video that hopefully we're not on here talking about an overtime loss. It wasn't an overtime loss, but it was a shootout loss, unfortunately. However, we still did get away with the point. I saw someone on Twitter saying that Canucks are going to go 0-82 but still get 82 points because of 82 overtime losses. That would be crazy if it did happen. Hopefully that doesn't happen. We're going to win a game eventually. It's going to happen. It's just going to take a little bit longer. Just hold out, and we're going to be on here talking about Vancouver's W soon. But that's going to do it for this episode of Canucks Digest. I've been your host, Griffin. Make sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you don't miss any and all updates this season. But that's going to do it for today's video. Take care.